Hello, I'm Rick Steiner. Welcome to Lux Life Discovered. My guest today is Arlette Godges, and Arlette, thank you for coming back and being with us.
Well, you're very welcome. It's always exciting to be here.
Well, we're going to start this Aging Well segment, which will be a quarterly segment. And I was so impressed with you when you were on previously about your Aging Up Well company and mindset. So, kind of refresh people what that means exactly.
Okay, well, thank you, Rick, for that. So I'm a physical therapist. I've been a physical therapist for about 35 years and still actively practice. My practice has changed quite a bit over the years. It was more conventional um, physical therapy business before. I worked in hospitals. I led skilled nursing departments and outpatient departments. And then really when I hit my um, late 40s, early 50s, my emphasis really changed, and it changed into prevention, and it changed into, how do I help people actually age up well? And that question ended up being the title or the name of my company, which is Age Up Well. And I now still see patients that come out of hospitals post-op, and I'm really staying in the traditional uh, system with that to see what people might need. But really, also, my practice is about taking it one step further and teaching people how to move into their next decades of life and being able to do the things that they want to do. And I myself, I'm 60 and I'm very active, and I've been an athlete all my life, and still compete and in swimming, in master swimming, and really enjoy that. And it's usually an impetus to go somewhere far away and have a lot of fun with my friends, having community. So it encompasses all these things that are really important as we age. It's community, it's being motivated, it's committing to something that will give you better movement and better health altogether, and a little bit more of a healthier outlook in life.
Right. So, a key word you mentioned too is prevention. And that's allowing yourself the opportunity to take advantage of exercise or whatever it may be to prevent something from happening later. Because do you find a lot of people are taking care of themselves once as a result of something happening? You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes,
it's kind of
that's
after the fact.
yes, Rick, that's a really good point. I think people are more motivated when they have had a close call. And most typically, we see that with people who have had a heart issue. Like they have a heart attack, and or their doctor tells them, "Holy cow, you're like 2 minutes away from a heart attack. You need to change your lifestyle." And then they go, "Oh wow, what does that mean?" And that's a huge chapter, right? That's a book. That means nutrition, that means lifestyle choices, that means exercise, that means really refocusing probably the community that you hang out with and the habits that you have. So I do see that. And, my hat's off to people that really make that happen, because that's not easy. And we also see that with, heart attacks, usually it's also associated with smoking. So that becomes an enormous commitment of a lifestyle change. But more than that, I think people have acquiesced to the fact that when they hit 50, oh, I'm old, or I'm getting old. And yes, it's okay for me to, get a little thicker around the middle, to run a little bit less, to work out a little bit less, I'm not sleeping so well. We see that a lot with women that are pre and menopausal, that, their hormones are just completely wacky. And it's so easy to give in to that because it is so uncomfortable. So it is guiding people through the decade really of 50 to 60 to maintain what you have done and or start something in order to prepare for your next decades. The way I like to look at it is, if you're turning 60, you're really training for 80. If you're turning 70, you're really training for 90. You need to look at what are the things that I want to do as I age. And you cannot take for granted that because you can do it today, you will be able to do it in 20 years. You actually have to work at that.
Right. That's like me. I'm 65. I'll be 66 this summer. And, I was telling someone the other day, being middle aged, it's like, it really hasn't really affected me that much. And they laughed. They're like, do you remember being middle aged? I'm like, oh gosh, that was 20 years ago or 25 years ago. So it's kind of crazy, as we get older, like, I don't feel like I'm 65, but I know I am. And so it's kind of a sobering fact sometimes. And a lot of people don't do well with that. And, you know, without realizing it, some people start to give up.
True, and I'm probably you probably see that in your peers, but you have such a worldly outlook and you're so proactive in looking at what is out there and how can I be my best self, right? And you are not your average 66-year-old. Um, I think that yes, we are younger as a total. Um, in America as we were maybe 20, 30 years ago at 65. But let's take 65 as the age group to talk about because I think it's a real pivotal point right there.
Right.
At 65, I think you start to really draw out of the bank of health that you have created in the 30, 25 years before that. And at 65, it's never, don't misunderstand me. It is never too late to start, but at 65 you are really getting the benefits of what you have put into that health bank. And the people who have done nothing, they really need to make a very sobering choice of, I still want to be able to play with my grandkids at 75. I still want to be able to do all these things at 80. I want to keep my feet. I don't want to get diabetes.
Right.
I want to be able to, um, play golf, go skiing, do things with my spouse that we enjoy, travel the world, do all these things that have been on my bucket list now that I'm truly retired, right? 65 is usually the retirement age for people that have had conventional jobs. And we see that so often that they have this bucket list of things they want to do and travel, but then they really can't because guess what? If you go to London or you go to Paris or you go to any other city, you want to walk and you want to be able to walk on the cobblestones. You want to be able to, do 15,000 steps in a day. You're going to be dead tired, but it's going to be fun and you will have seen that city. And that is something that um we don't really think about. We take that for granted that we will still be able to do that. But if you have diabetic feet and neuropathy, you will not be able to do that. So, I like to look at it with my clients that are in their 50s or early 60s. I like to look at what do we need to do to optimize you to be able to do those things that you want to do now and also in 10 years.
Right. And something too, I think a lot of people as they get older, they're intimidated by going to a gym because they're not young. I mean, what I'm saying, there's a lot of young
Right?
people there, so they feel intimidated by that. In fact, I was working out not too long ago and I looked around, I thought, I could be everybody's grandfather in here. It's like that sobering thing. And one guy asked me, he said, "Sir, do you need a spot?" And I thought, in my mind, I'm thinking, I will let this fall on my chest and choke me to death or my neck before I let you spot me. That whole mindset. But he was being very nice. But again, he thought I was old, so I shouldn't be doing it. But your videos on your Instagram, you have a lot of just, I won't say simple, but I mean a lot of key videos that about movement and that are easy enough for everybody to do. And I mean that as a compliment. So people don't have to
No,
join a
totally.
gym and be in some rigorous routine. There are small things you can do as well.
Absolutely, Rick. And no, you're 100% correct. That was the entire purpose of my Instagram is to do that. I myself, I don't need an Instagram for myself of what I need to do.
Right.
So I work really hard in a gym, and to your point, I'm often the only woman in a gym, let alone the only woman over 30. So, and I lift really heavy myself. I also train really hard in the pool, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, that matters to me personally, but I don't need to show that off on Instagram because I'm doing that for myself and my own well-being. But what I want to be an inspiration to other people to have a healthy life and to know that they can do that at any given stage.
Right.
Now, here's a really important piece to that, though, and you spoke to that about how simple things are, but you need to be able to do the simple things correctly in
Sure.
order to build on that. That is really, really important. You need to have good range of motion. You need to have good balance. You need to be able to have good posture, because if you go to the gym and you have poor posture, you're going to hurt yourself. So a lot of my videos, they are one thing and that's it, because I have found that even as a physical therapist, when I work with my post total knee patients or total hip patients or back patients, if I give them a whole list of exercises, they won't do any of them. But if I give them three targeted things and I tell them why, and they do them, and they're really simple, and then I come back 3, 4, 5 days later and I up the game on those, guess
And
what?
they'll
They
do
will
it.
have done every one of those exercises and they will be able to be advanced. And I think it's really important that we have precision of what we do with our bodies, because especially as we're aging, we might say, okay, we can do all these things, but our tensile strength and our tendons and ligaments really does change. And so if we are lifting heavy weights, but we are in a bad posture, we really do get hurt, and it takes longer because we have older bodies to heal.
Yeah.
So foundational correctness is really, really important. And so these exercises that I do, yes, some of them are really to get people off the couch and motivated to
Exactly. Yeah.
move, but some of them are also reminders to people to just be foundationally correct.
And that's key, because if not, they'll start some routine and then hurt themselves, and then they'll, in many cases, will just totally turn them off completely, and they won't do anything. Yeah.
And then they'll abandon it. The
Right.
idea that you need to have something that is fundamentally fun. I always do tell people you need to find something that is fun to do, or you need to have a goal. Like if you're just getting off the couch and you haven't really done much and you're not a very big athlete, find a friend, go for a walk every day, start maybe with a 15-minute walk, but do a couple of the exercises that I have on my videos in between. Make it fun, have a nice chat, and work up to 30 minutes in 2 weeks. That's enough. That's sustainable, right?
Right.
And then it becomes a habit.
What do you think the biggest mindset is for someone, especially someone that hasn't worked out or taken their physical exercise serious? What do you think the biggest mindset is that you've had to help someone overcome?
It's the overwhelm of it.
That makes
It's
sense.
the
Yeah.
o- it's the overwhelm of, I'm weak. I'm having a hard time getting upstairs. I can't really get up and down from the floor easily. Um, I'm overweight. Um, and where do I start? And I think it's just really important to start one day at a time, one thing at a time. If you do 10 sit to stands from a chair on day one, those are 10 sit to stands more than you did the day before.
True.
And it really does start at that level. And then it is about maintaining it and building a habit around that. And I think if you start, again, with my clients, I start with very targeted exercises that yield a really big benefit that is specific to them individually. And so when they see a change in their mobility or their ability to move, then they are really much more motivated and they will stay engaged.
Right. It kind of provides that extra motivation to see what is possible next. But I do see how you can, we get so busy with life, and sometimes it's not just the pressure of everything, it's just the everyday routine. We just get kind of complacent, and before you know it, we are overweight or we haven't done anything in a while. And then it's just like finding that motivation to get started, because you feel like you lost that ability to get back to where you were. And that's the other thing, leaving that ego at the door.
Correct. I think you just brought up two really big things. And one is, you need to leave the ego at the door. It's
Yeah.
not about being 20 again. It's not about performing like you're 20 or 30.
Right.
And you do need to check that if you're starting to exercise, especially if you were an athlete in your younger years. But you need to match yourself up with a group that might have all kinds of abilities of doing things. You might find a community. That is a really nice thing because that holds you accountable. And one of the examples that is very familiar to me is master swimming. We have somewhere upwards of 60,000 members across the United States, and workout groups and teams all over. And it's an absolutely wonderful thing. I've made the most fantastic friends across the United States through that community. Um, and they're of all abilities. It goes from ex-Olympians to people that picked up swimming because their knees hurt and they can't run anymore. And they have found this, and people wait, they say, okay, we're going to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or we're going Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And they're expected to be at workout. They're being held accountable by their peers, and they like that. So that's one thing, to really have a community and dial into that, whatever that might be. That can also be a yoga class, that can be a Pilates class, that can be any a running group, a walking group, for that matter. It can be a bird watching group because you will go every Saturday and go out and walk.
Actually do
So
something.
it doesn't have to be a competitive athletic event necessarily. It can just be something that is outdoors and active, and I think that's what's important.
That's true. Yeah, and community is important, and I think that's where a lot of people kind of miss that part of it. Because we get in that mindset sometime that, well, I'm so far out of shape, or I can't do this, can't do that, so I'm going to do it by myself. Well, it's easy to sabotage your efforts because you set unrealistic goals. First of all, well, because like you're smart by doing the 2 to 3 tasks. I look at like the whole sheet that I want to do, and fail at like 2 or 3 of them, and it's like, well, I've wasted my time. That type thing. So we're hard on ourselves sometimes more than we should be.
Absolutely, because when I look at, and this might be something for another time to chat about, the building blocks that really make us successful in movement are, endurance, strength, range of motion, balance, and coordination. So these 5 things need to all work together for us to have this optimal movement and optimal posture, and to be able to build on that. And we lose that. And as we age, we definitely lose coordination. We definitely lose balance. We lose range of motion. That is the reason why a lot of people end up with replaced hips and knees
Right.
because they're wearing it in the wrong way. We lose strength. And I think when people understand why strength is so important, it's not just that we can go and lift logs or whatnot, but it is because it builds muscle. And to maintain muscle mass actually builds a resilience in your body to metabolic disease as we age. So having a higher muscle mass in your body will 100% decrease the likelihood of you getting diabetes or the onset of diabetes.
Right. I know you were a competitive swimmer, or still are, and you've been an athlete. But where did your passion to pursue this area? Where did that come? We're going to talk about the 5 building blocks on the next podcast. That would be good. But so where does your passion come from? Because it
Wow,
was it
that's
was well before you turned 60. So it's not just I turned 60 and this is my passion.
100%. And I've never been asked that question. It's a really good question, and I have to process that for a second while I'm talking about it. I think a big thing was that I love life so much and I love doing things so much. And the things I like to do require a lot of strength and endurance and resilience. And so being in the field, I recognize that, wow, I really have to work hard in order to be able to do that when I'm 60 or 70 or 80. So I think that was a big motivation for me. And then watching people fall off the cliff that were my peers, and going, oh, wow, that's not okay. You can't do that. And that started really early on, by the way. That started when my children were toddlers, where some of the moms had toddlers and babies, and they would not take time for themselves to exercise and get in shape after they have their kids. And I always thought, wow, I'm not going to be a very happy mom or a very useful mom if I can't do the things I want to do and if I can't play hard with my kids. So I took time out to stay healthy. So that's even in my 30s, right? So then when I hit my 40s, I really watched some of my friends starting to hit perimenopause and just giving up and saying, well, that's just being old. And my mom was
Right.
menopause 48 or 50. And so, okay, well, that's my thing too. And I'm thinking, well, just because that happened to your mom doesn't mean it has to happen to you. And and then it was a real pivotal point, I will say, when I went to, we had moved and I found a new um, family practice doctor. And, we're talking and I'm not taking any medications and I'm fine and all that is good. But, I was just asking about my eyes. I'm going, I've really seen a decline in my eyesight as far as, for reading or whatnot. And I was probably about 46. And she goes, oh, well, just wait till you're 40. And I was like, well, but I'm 46. And she looked at the chart and she looked at me and she goes, well, what are you doing training so hard and doing all these things? And that's just crazy and blah, 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 blah. And I said, excuse me. I took my gown off, put my clothes on and walked out because
You
it
didn't need
was
someone to tell you not to do it. Yeah.
well, and I really felt then that was a real pivotal point for me because I realized how medicine treats people by their birthday as opposed
Right.
to by them individually. And, at that same appointment then or later, I was told I needed to go on Lipitor and I needed to go on all that. I have like no cholesterol issues. I have zero of anything. But it was just preventative. That would be a good thing because I'm almost 50. And that motivated me to become a geriatric board certified specialist, actually, to really learn the nitty gritty about the aging process and dive into that whole cellular world of that. So that was very motivating to me. And I realized that even in physical therapy, often we treat people by their birthday. And I became quite passionate about not doing that.
Well, that
So
makes
I
sense.
think,
I hadn't thought of it from that perspective, but you're right.
yeah. I mean, there's like for physical therapy, for example, I noticed there were two teams. There was the team of, oh my gosh, you are in such incredible shape for your age. Here is a 30-pound weight, just like you would hand to maybe a 25, 30-year-old. Or, oh, wow, you're 62. Here are two pink weights for you to do your workout with. Um, and there's a really big life in between that. And I absolutely honor the aging process, and I think it's really important to do that and be educated about it because we are not 20 anymore, and our body isn't 20 anymore, and we don't recover that way or heal that way, but we are able to do a lot more than we might think we can.
Those are good points for sure because I you know, in the gym you have to, like I said, I learned a long time ago you have to leave the ego at the door because I'm not going to perform like a 20-year-old. Don't want to. I'm not out to compete or anything like that. But the ego does get in the way sometimes. Yeah.
Well, it does because it's good to have a healthy ego, and that's okay.
That-
It's okay to be a little bit self-motivated, right?
that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
But to really answer your question, I think it was a process. It wasn't one big turning point of it. There was a part of that I actually enjoy aging. I mean, I know that sounds really weird. Um, I to me, it's not the whole word of anti-aging. I think we spoke about that last time. I really don't embrace that at all. I embrace a health span and a healthy life and a healthy longevity, an active life, a mature life. Those are the words that I would like to use instead. And I think we're privileged for every healthy birthday. We're gifted, and I'm very grateful for that. And I um, have the energy and the passion to, bring that to other people, and it brings me a lot of joy.
Well, you do it very well. So I'm glad our paths crossed. And so we're going to put your information up. So I want to make sure that people know to go join and follow you on Instagram because great content. But we also have your site there as well as your email address. And so I appreciate you starting this quarterly segment with me called Aging Well because, it's taken me a while to realize, hey, you know, you're not middle aged. I'm not middle aged anymore. And it's time to look at some things differently, but it doesn't mean slacking off and doing nothing, in the process because of the age.
Right. I think that's a great summary, Rick, but I'll leave you with this to ponder. What
Okay.
really is middle age, right?
Well,
So middle age, when our parents were 65, was very drastically different than middle age now.
that's true. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be 90 or 100, then you truly actually are in middle age.
Well, I'm gonna go with that.
Okay. I will leave it with that. I think that's a good way to end,
Sounds
right?
great. Yes. Well, thank you for being with us, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Lux Life Discovered.
You're very welcome. Till next time.